You hear the headline and it sounds like relief. Social Security is getting a cost of living increase, and you think, finally, older Americans get a little breathing room. But the money doesn't even get a chance to feel like money. It lands and something else reaches in first. Medicare Part B for 2026 is set at $202.9 a month, up from $185, and the COLA is 2.8%. Do the math in your head and you realize the punchline is ugly. More than a quarter of the raise can vanish before the month even starts. COLA up, premium up faster, and you feel poorer. What makes this hit different is where it happens. Not at the grocery store checkout, not at the gas station. It happens inside the system, like a silent tax that doesn't need your permission. The deposit shows up and the deduction is already waiting, calm and legal and automatic. Try to think about how that feels as a life rhythm. Every good news announcement arrives with a hidden asterisk, and once you see it, you start noticing a pattern that's bigger than one premium. Picture the next 48 hours after that headline drops. You scroll and the same story repeats in different outfits. A finance site frames it like a pay cut you didn't vote for. A seniors organization spells it out in plain language, like they're trying not to scare anyone while still telling the truth. The government fact sheet lists the numbers with no emotion at all, which somehow makes it colder. Then you hit the twist that stings the most. The truly catastrophic costs of aging are often the ones Medicare barely touches. It's like you thought you were arguing about a monthly bill, and suddenly you're staring at the price of an entire season of your life. Here's the part people miss because it sounds too technical to be personal. Aging isn't just more people turning 65. Aging is when a mandatory cost grows faster than the thing meant to protect you from growing costs. It's a system-level squeeze that shows up as a personal lifestyle change. Your benefit ticks up by an amount. That looks decent on paper, and then your health expenses claim first position in line, and because it's deducted, not demanded, it doesn't feel like a fight. It feels like the room getting smaller. Let me translate it into a scene you've lived, even if you've never been on Medicare. Imagine you get a 2.8% raise at work. You smile, you exhale, you think about groceries, maybe a nicer weekend, maybe just less anxiety. Then your building announces the mandatory entry fees are rising faster than your raise, and they take it automatically from your paycheck before you even see the money. On paper, you're richer. In your kitchen, you're tighter. That's how a nation can increase benefits and still produce the sensation of decline. And Part B is only the front gate. There's also the Part B deductible at $283 a year. Now, to be fair, the system is complicated, and not every retiree experiences it the same way. Some people have supplemental coverage that cushions the blow. Some people use very little care in a given year. Some people are protected by income rules, while others are pulled into higher charges as their income crosses certain lines. But the direction of pressure is the point, and the pressure has a talent for spreading. A squeeze that starts with just $17.9 more per month can end up shaping what you eat, when you travel, whether you fill a prescription, and how long you wait before you see a doctor. Here's the quiet mechanism that makes it feel like the country is aging in slow motion. Social Security COLA is designed to keep up with broad inflation, the everyday cost of living. Health costs don't always behave like everyday costs. They can run on their own engine, faster, steeper, less predictable, and they don't politely wait for your benefit to catch up. So the ratio changes. More of your fixed income becomes health reserved, less becomes life lived. That's not a culture war argument. That's arithmetic that moves through millions of households like a tide. Try to think about the psychological trap hiding in that arithmetic. When the deduction is automatic, it doesn't trigger the same anger as a price tag you can see. It doesn't spark a viral video. It doesn't give you a villain with a face. It's just a line item that quietly becomes a larger slice of your month, and then an even larger slice, until you adjust without realizing you adjusted. People don't riot against a slow leak. They simply stop filling the bucket all the way, and this is where the story stops being a personal budgeting issue and starts acting like geopolitics. Because a nation's strength is not only jets and ships and headlines, it's whether its older population can stay stable without draining everything around them. When health costs climb faster than benefits, the system begins to borrow stability from somewhere else, from adult children, from local programs, from state budgets, from the future. It's like an empire funding today's calm by quietly selling tomorrow's margin. If you want to see how that plays out, watch what happens inside a family, not inside Congress. Someone's mom falls, someone's dad has a stroke. Someone needs help bathing, eating, remembering, walking, and it's not for 2 weeks. It's 4 months, maybe years. And this is the moment where the scariest reveal lands. The most expensive part of aging is often long-term care, and that is not the warm blanket people assume Medicare is. Medicare can help in limited, specific windows, but the long haul is a different battlefield entirely. People hear nursing home and their brain turns it into a vague, faraway concept, like a place in a movie. But the cost is not a concept. It's a monthly number that can look like a mortgage multiplied, and it keeps coming whether you feel ready or not. Try to think about the emotional math of that. You can handle a premium, you can handle a deductible, but can you handle a bill that arrives like a second rent, except it's for basic human care? So here's the cliff edge for the next part of this story. Part B rising is the headline. The real drama is what happens when the short-term coverage clock runs out and the long-term need begins. That's when families discover the system has an escape hatch, and the bill doesn't disappear. it changes hands, and the moment it changes hands, it starts reshaping the economy of an entire generation from the inside out. When that bill changes hands, it doesn't feel like policy anymore. It feels like a door closing in a hallway you assumed would stay open. People talk about Medicare like it's a shield, but the shield has a time limit, and the clock starts the moment you're most vulnerable. One hospital stay can flip your life from I am managing to I need help every day. And the system's first instinct is not to carry you, but to measure you. Try to think about the cruelty of a countdown that begins right after a crisis, when you're still dizzy, still weak, still trying to remember what normal felt like. The reveal is simple and brutal. The longest, most expensive stretch of aging is the stretch where coverage becomes thinner, not thicker. Zoom out for a second and you'll see three forces moving at once, like gears that don't care who gets caught. The first gear is the mismatch. Social Security adjusts with broad inflation. Medical costs can sprint on their own track, and retirees live on the track that's sprinting. Each year, the ratio shifts a little more and a little more until health reserve starts eating life lived. People think the danger is a single spike. One bad year, one shocking premium increase. But the heavier danger is the habit of it, the way the system normalizes a squeeze by making it routine. You don't notice the room shrinking when the walls move an inch at a time, and then one day you can't turn around. The second gear is the one nobody likes to say out loud at dinner. Long-term care is not a bad month. It's a different era of expenses, where the bill looks less like a copay and more like a second household. And this is where expectations get ambushed, because Medicare's help with skilled nursing is narrow, conditional, and time-limited, tied to rules that most families only learn when they're already in panic mode. You think the system was built for the exact moment you need it most. Then you find out it was built to help for a little while. And then step back, and then it gets worse. The costs don't pause when coverage pauses, so the gap becomes the story, not a policy gap. A life gap. Let me slow this down, just for a moment, because the numbers can make people emotionally numb. Imagine the sound of a house at 2 a.m. when someone older wakes up confused and scared. Imagine the quiet bargaining in your own head. Do I take another shift? Do I sleep? Do I call my sibling? Do I move them into my home? Do I move out of mine? In that quiet, premium and deductible stop being words and start being pressure on the spine. This is the part I wish everyone understood before the emergency, not after it. Because once you're inside it, you don't have time to study the map. Now the third gear clicks, and it's the one that turns a private crisis into a national one. When families can't carry long-term care, the system doesn't magically become generous. It reroutes the cost. Medicaid becomes the payer of last resort, and that phrase sounds technical until you realize it means when you run out of options, you run into a new set of rules. Often that includes spending down assets to qualify, which means the middle class gets squeezed in a way that feels like a trap. Too well off to get help early, too depleted to recover later. The mini reveal here is that the long-term care system can quietly reshape wealth, not through scandal, but through necessity. It's not a heist. It's a slow transfer, bill by bill, until the savings you thought would protect your family becomes the price of keeping someone safe. This is where the stakes sharpen, because the bill doesn't just hit the patient. It hits the adult child's job, the grandchild's tuition plan, the mortgage decision, the decision to marry, the decision to move cities, the decision to have kids at all, and the uglier part is the timing. It often lands right when the next generation is already carrying high housing costs, high childcare costs, and fragile savings. People argue about aging America like it's a demographic chart, but the chart is only the shadow on the wall. The real thing is intergenerational pressure, the feeling that two eras of life are trying to live off the same paycheck. A country can look rich on the outside and still run its families like a rationing system. So why does this story stay oddly quiet? Because it's designed to be quiet. Automatic deductions don't spark the same outrage as a price hike you can see. They slide under your emotional radar and call it normal. The language also acts like fog: coinsurance, deductibles, income-related adjustments, eligibility windows, exceptions to exceptions. Try to think about how fast your brain shuts down when someone throws 5 acronyms at you and then asks you to make a life decision. That's not stupidity. That's cognitive defense, your mind protecting itself from overload, and the system benefits from overload, because confusion creates compliance without needing persuasion. The money moves, the paperwork closes, life goes on. Here's the geopolitical lens that makes this feel like a thriller instead of a spreadsheet. When a society's older population becomes financially fragile, the state doesn't just face a medical problem. It faces a stability problem. Fragility multiplies. It drives political anger. It stresses state budgets. It forces trade-offs between education, infrastructure, and care, and it makes every economic shock hit harder. What looks like a health policy debate becomes a contest over national priorities, where every option is expensive, and every delay compounds the cost. This is not collapse. It's erosion, which is scarier in a different way, because erosion looks like normal weather until the cliff line suddenly moves. I also want to be honest about the counterpoint, because it matters. Not every retiree is doomed, and not every family is powerless, and there are tools that can reduce damage if you use them early. If you're approaching Medicare age, compare plans annually, read every annual notice of change, and use your state health insurance assistance program counselor for unbiased guidance before you commit. That won't fix the system, but it can stop avoidable mistakes from becoming permanent bills. The hard truth is that preparation isn't a guarantee, it's just leverage, and leverage is precious when the clock starts, because the scariest moment isn't the first premium increase, it's the moment you realize the system doesn't panic when you do. And that's the cliff we're standing on. A slow crisis doesn't feel like a crisis until the options narrow, and then it feels like everything happened at once. Next, I'm going to show you why this is so hard to talk about politically, what the point of no return looks like in real life, and the 3 signals that tell you the squeeze is about to tighten again, and then the numbers stop matching. The numbers stop matching because the system isn't one bill, it's a maze of doors that open and close on schedule. A premium rises, a deductible rises, and the out-of-pocket threshold quietly shifts upward like a tide. You can't fight it the way you fight a surprise expense, because it doesn't arrive as a surprise. It arrives as policy, and policy arrives as routine. That is the point of no return most people don't notice until later, when the routine becomes your baseline and you start budgeting around a smaller version of your own life. The scariest trick is that the biggest hits don't always look like hits. You don't see a cashier, you see a deduction. You don't hear a salesperson, you hear an automated notice. You watched people accept a new monthly normal simply because it was phrased as standard. And anything labeled standard feels inevitable. Then the next reveal lands. Income-related premiums can climb far above the standard amount, and suddenly retirees with the same age live in 2 different financial universes. The system isn't only asking, "Are you old?" It's also asking, "How much did you earn and how exposed are you now?" Now take the long-term care clock, because this is where families get blindsided. Skilled nursing facility coverage is measured in benefit periods, and a benefit period can reset after you've been out for a stretch. That means the deductible can come back like a sequel you didn't ask for, and it can happen more than once in a year. The first 20 days can be fully covered in the right circumstances, but after that you're staring at daily coinsurance, and the meter doesn't care if you're emotionally exhausted. It's not just that coverage ends. It's that coverage changes shape mid-crisis, exactly when your ability to adapt is at its lowest. Try to think about what it does to a family when the bill switches from monthly to daily. A premium feels like a subscription you can plan for, even if it hurts. A daily charge feels like a leak you can't locate, because every sunrise produces a new cost, and then the final reveal in that chain. After day 100, many people are responsible for all costs, which turns the fear from, "Can we manage this?" to, "How long can we survive this?" That's when the phone calls start, the frantic ones, the ones nobody wants to make. And it's also when the system quietly hands the problem off to the next program and the next set of eligibility rules. This is where the story becomes national, because Medicaid isn't a side character in the long-term care plot. Medicaid is often the payer of last resort for long-term services and supports, which means state budgets end up carrying the back half of aging, and state budgets don't have the same escape routes people imagine the federal government has. When Medicaid costs rise, states face trade-offs that don't sound like healthcare at first. Provider rates, benefit design, access, waiting lists, paperwork intensity. The reveal here is that the aging crisis can show up as administrative friction before it shows up as an official headline, and families feel the friction first. Here's why politicians struggle to talk about it without getting burned. The problem is slow, technical, and emotionally explosive, a rare combination that makes public debate messy. If you oversimplify, you mislead. If you explain it accurately, you lose the room in acronyms and fine print, and because the money moves through automatic deductions and eligibility rules, there's no single villain you can point at without lying. So the country ends up treating an erosion problem with short-term patches, because patches are easier to sell than structural reforms. That's how a long-term crisis becomes a permanent background noise. But there's another reason it stays quiet, and it's darker. The system relies on people not wanting to imagine their own dependency. We can debate foreign wars all day because they feel out there. Dependency feels like a threat to identity, so people postpone the conversation until the conversation is forced on them by an ambulance ride. I'm not saying that to shame anyone. I'm saying it because the emotional avoidance is part of the mechanism. The longer a society avoids planning for dependency, the more expensive dependency becomes when it arrives. And when it arrives at scale, it's not just a family problem, it's a stability problem. So let's talk scenarios, because this is where you stop feeling helpless and start watching the battlefield. One scenario is the less bad version. Premiums and deductibles keep rising, but slowly enough that COLA still provides some oxygen most years. In that world, the squeeze is real, but it's gradual, and the main damage is lifestyle shrinkage. The second, more common scenario is that long-term care costs keep outpacing everything else, and more families hit the spend-down wall, pushing more pressure onto Medicaid. The third, high-stress scenario is that state budget pressure intensifies, and the response becomes tighter eligibility processes, narrower provider networks, slower access, and louder political fights that spill into election seasons. If you want to track which scenario we're sliding toward, don't watch the speeches. Watch 3 signals. First, the annual Medicare premium and deductible announcements, because they tell you what the front gate will cost next year. Second, the gap between healthcare inflation and Social Security adjustments, because that gap is the engine of the squeeze. Third, Medicaid budget pressure at the state level, because that's where long-term care stress turns into real-world access problems. The reveal is that the system telegraphs its stress in numbers before it shows stress in services, but only if you're looking in the right places. And once you know where to look, you start seeing the pattern early. Now, I'm going to give you one practical move that's boring, legal, and oddly powerful. Before a crisis hits, document preferences, assign trusted decision makers, and learn your local counseling resources so choices are made calmly, not under deadline, and not by whoever shouts loudest. It won't eliminate costs, but it can prevent the most expensive kind of mistake, the rushed one. I say this because the system punishes confusion and preparation reduces confusion. It's not a guarantee, but it's leverage, and leverage is what you want when the rules start moving. There's also a counterpoint worth keeping on the table, because the story isn't one-note doom. Some retirees do fine because they have strong supplemental coverage, strong savings, or lower healthcare usage in a given year. Some families manage long-term care at home with community support, and some states invest in home and community-based services to reduce reliance on institutions. These are real differences, and they matter, and that's why the issue is multi-layered rather than one clean narrative. But even with those differences, the direction of pressure is what I am asking you to notice. The system shifts more cost responsibility onto households over time, and households feel it as shrinking freedom. So, let's land this plane with the clearest framing I can give you. America is aging doesn't only mean there are more older people. It means the cost structure of aging is outrunning the protections designed to stabilize aging. And the gap is being paid in reduced quality of life, reduced family wealth, and increased state fiscal strain. Every year, more of the raise becomes a medical claim on your future. And the most expensive chapter of aging is still the one many people assume Medicare will cover, until they discover it won't, at least not for long. If you want me to turn this into a full, tightly edited voice-over script with the same thriller pacing, the same reveals, and a clean watch list you can follow each year, drop the aging in the comments. And if you're the kind of person who likes seeing the numbers early, subscribe, because this channel is built for tracking pressure before it turns into panic. I'll keep it simple, I'll keep it honest, and I'll keep calling out the quiet mechanisms that change real life, because the headline will always say benefits went up, but the lived reality is this: America is aging, and medical bills are eating the benefits meant to protect you.